Picture this. It is the year 2017, and a brand new game drops completely out of nowhere. Within weeks, your classmates are talking about it at lunch. Your older brother is staying up until 2 in the morning playing it. NFL players are doing its dances in the end zone. Drake is literally live streaming it with the most watched Twitch broadcast in history at that time. A game built by a studio that had never made anything like it before becomes the most downloaded, most streamed, most talked about game on the planet seemingly overnight. That game was Fortnite. And if you were alive and even remotely connected to pop culture between 2017 and 2019, you could not escape it. But here we are now, years later, and the conversation has shifted. People are asking whether Fortnite is dead, whether it ever mattered, whether it can survive in a world where new games come out every single month fighting for the same players. So today, on the Inventor realm, we are going all the way in. We are talking about where Fortnite came from, how it became the biggest game in the world, what went wrong, and whether it still has a throne to sit on. Stick with me through this one because the full story is way more complicated and honestly way more interesting than most people realize. To understand what Fortnite became, you have to understand what it almost was not. Epic Games, the studio behind Fortnite, originally launched the game in July 2017 as a cooperative survival experience. That version, now called Fortnite Save the World, was a paid early access title where you built forts and fought waves of zombie-like creatures called husks. It was fine. It was not revolutionary. The reviews were decent, but nobody was calling it a genre-defining experience. Epic had poured years of development into that mode, and while it had a loyal following, it was not exactly setting the gaming world on fire. But then something happened that changed everything. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, or PUBG, had released earlier that same year and was absolutely exploding on PC. The Battle Royale format, where 100 players drop into a map and the last one standing wins, was clearly resonating with people in a massive way. Epic looked at what PUBG was doing and made a decision that, in hindsight, looks like one of the smartest pivots in gaming industry history. In just 2 months, they built a Battle Royale mode for Fortnite, bolted it onto the existing game engine, and released it for free in September 2017. That decision to make it free to play was not just smart, it was the entire reason Fortnite became what it became. According to Epic Games, Fortnite Battle Royale hit 1 million players in its first 24 hours. Within 2 weeks, it had 10 million. By the end of 2017, it had 45 million players worldwide. Those numbers are not exaggerated. Epic themselves confirmed this data across multiple press releases and investor briefings from that period. What made Fortnite different from PUBG, which was clearly the inspiration, was a combination of things working together all at once. The building mechanic was the most obvious differentiator. You could harvest materials from the environment and construct walls, ramps, and structures in real time during combat. This added a layer of skill expression that PUBG simply did not have. You were not just a good shot. You were also a tactician who could create cover on the fly, build a tower in seconds, or trap an opponent in a box. The skill ceiling was high enough that it rewarded dedication, which meant players who put in the hours felt genuinely powerful, and that feeling of progression, of getting better, is one of the most powerful hooks any game can have. But it was not just the mechanics. Fortnite understood something about its audience that a lot of games miss. This was not trying to be a serious military simulator. The map had giant cartoon mushrooms and colorful buildings. The character skins were absurd. You could play as a banana wearing a tuxedo or a tomato with a head shaped like a pizza slice. The tone was irreverent and playful, and it sent a clear message to players that this was a place you could come and just have fun without taking yourself too seriously. For a generation that had grown up watching gaming become increasingly gritty and realistic, that shift in tone was genuinely refreshing. Then came the collaborations. And this is where Fortnite stopped being just a game and became something closer to a cultural platform. In December 2018, Marvel and Epic partnered to add Thanos as a limited-time playable character tied to the release of Avengers: Infinity War. That crossover event crashed servers and generated so much press coverage that it was discussed in mainstream entertainment outlets, not just gaming ones. According to data from Superdata Research, which is now part of Nielsen, Fortnite generated approximately $2.4 billion in revenue in 2018 alone. To put that in perspective, that is more than the box office gross of many major Hollywood films. The game was not just succeeding, it was rewriting what success in gaming could look like. The cultural penetration reached its peak in 2019 when Fortnite hosted its first in-game concert, featuring DJ Marshmello at a virtual venue called Pleasant Park. Over 10 million players attended that event simultaneously inside the game. This was not a trailer or a preview. This was a live interactive experience inside a video game. And 10 million people showed up. It pointed towards something nobody had fully articulated yet: the idea of the Metaverse as a real destination rather than a sci-fi concept. Epic was building something that looked less like a game and more like a social space. A living world where culture and entertainment could happen in real time. If you have been enjoying this breakdown so far and you want more deep dives into gaming history, industry moves, and the stories behind the games everyone is playing, hit that subscribe button right now on the Inventor realm, because we go deep on the stuff that actually matters in gaming, and you do not want to miss what is coming next on this channel. Now here is where the story gets complicated, because Fortnite did fall. Not completely, not permanently. But it fell hard enough that by 2020 the conversation around the game had fundamentally changed. The peak concurrent player counts from 2019 had declined. Streamers who had built entire careers around Fortnite began moving to other games. The cultural dominance that had seemed unshakable started to crack. So what happened? Several things happened at the same time. First, the game itself became harder. The building mechanic, which had been such a draw in the early days, had evolved into something called box fighting and editing. A style of close-range combat so technically demanding that new players felt completely overwhelmed. You would drop into a game, get killed in 3 seconds by someone building a skyscraper around you while simultaneously editing holes in walls and shotgunning through them. And you would not even understand what just happened. The skill gap between veteran players and newcomers had grown so wide that casual players, the huge middle portion of the audience, stopped finding it fun. When a game stops being fun for its casual players, it starts bleeding audience. Second, competition arrived. Apex Legends launched in February 2019 with no pre-release marketing. Just a sudden release and immediate word of mouth that exploded across streaming platforms. It hit 25 million players in its first week, according to EA's official statements. Call of Duty Warzone launched in March 2020 and brought in 30 million players in its first 10 days. These were enormous numbers, pulling directly from the same audience that Fortnite depended on. Players who wanted a more realistic shooter moved to Warzone. Players who wanted a faster, more fluid movement system moved to Apex. Fortnite suddenly had to compete with games that each excelled in areas where it was not the strongest. Third, and this one is subtle but important, the cultural conversation shifted away from Fortnite. The streamers and content creators who had propelled the game to mainstream attention moved on. When Ninja, who had been the face of Fortnite streaming and had been central to that Drake broadcast moment, started streaming other games and eventually moved exclusively to Mixer, it sent a signal. The game was no longer the default destination for gaming culture. It was one destination among many. But here is the thing about Fortnite that people who write it off tend to ignore. Epic Games did not accept the decline. They responded to it with one of the most aggressive reinvention campaigns in gaming history. In October 2019, they deleted the entire map. Not updated it, not added to it. Deleted it. The original island was swallowed by a black hole, and for about 36 hours, if you opened Fortnite, all you could see was a black hole on your screen. The servers were technically down, but the spectacle was intentional. The internet lost its mind. Millions of people who had barely thought about Fortnite in months were suddenly watching the black hole stream out of sheer curiosity. It was one of the most audacious marketing stunts in gaming, and it worked. When Chapter 2 launched and the new map was revealed, Fortnite had recaptured mainstream attention for a moment. They kept pushing. In 2020, they introduced Zero Build Mode, which removed the building mechanic entirely for players who wanted it. This was a direct response to the criticism that building had alienated casual players, and it worked. Zero Build brought back a wave of players who had left precisely because the building had felt impenetrable, according to Epic's own statements. Zero Build reached millions of players within weeks of its launch, with many being people who had not played Fortnite in years. It was not a replacement for the core game. It was an acknowledgement that the core game needed a companion mode that served a different kind of player. The collaborations also kept coming, and they kept escalating. Fortnite brought in characters from Star Wars, DC Comics, Marvel, Naruto, Dragon Ball Z, and dozens of other franchises. They hosted concerts for Travis Scott, Ariana Grande, and others, with the Travis Scott Astronomical event in April 2020 drawing an astonishing 12.3 million concurrent players according to Epic's post-event data. They introduced a racing mode, a Guitar Hero-style music experience, and a whole creative hub called UEFN, which stands for Unreal Editor for Fortnite, that allowed players to build and publish their own game modes. Epic essentially turned Fortnite into a platform that could host other games inside it. The numbers, when you actually look at them, tell a different story than the narrative of decline suggests. Fortnite reportedly had around 350 million registered accounts as of 2020 according to Epic Games, and that number has continued to grow. The game consistently ranks among the top played titles on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. In 2023, Epic relaunched the original Chapter 1 map in a mode called OG, and it became the most played season in Fortnite history, smashing concurrent player records, according to data tracked by the gaming analytics platform Statista and confirmed through Epic's own announcements. The OG season launch in November 2023 reached approximately 44.7 million players in a single day, which was a record for the game. That does not sound like a dead game. What Fortnite represents at this point in 2024 and beyond is something different from what it was in 2018. It is not the monoculture it once was. It does not dominate every streaming chart simultaneously the way it once did, but it has evolved into something arguably more durable, a platform that is constantly reinventing itself, absorbing collaborations from every corner of pop culture, and maintaining a player base that spans from 10-year-olds playing their first Battle Royale to 25-year-olds who have been dropping into the map since Season 1. The game has outlasted several of its would-be replacements. Warzone went through a catastrophic post-launch period that fractured its community. Apex Legends has struggled to grow its player base beyond a certain ceiling. Fortnite is still here, still relevant, still generating revenue and conversation. Is it still the king? Honestly, the question might be the wrong frame. Gaming has fragmented too much for any one game to hold the kind of cultural dominance Fortnite had at its peak. Minecraft, Roblox, Fortnite, and a handful of other games share a kind of rotating cultural relevance that shifts with each generation of players and each wave of content. What Fortnite has proven is that it is not a game that dies. It is a game that adapts. Every time the community calls it dead, it does something to remind people why it still matters. The story of Fortnite is ultimately a story about what happens when a game stops thinking of itself as used to game and starts thinking of itself as a world. Epic built something that has real estate in pop culture the way few games ever have. The dances became real dances people did at weddings and football games. The characters became Halloween costumes, the collaborations became events, and even now, in a more crowded and competitive market than the one Fortnite entered in 2017, it maintains a place that most games can only dream of. The rise was extraordinary, the stumble was real, but the fall, at least the final kind, has not happened yet. And given how many times Epic has managed to rewrite the script, maybe it never will. That is everything for today on the Inventor realm. If this was the kind of deep dive you are into, and you want to be here when we break down the next big story in gaming, make sure you are subscribed to the Inventor realm so you never miss a video. The next one is already in the works, and trust me, it is worth waiting for.